My name is Emily, I'm 33 years old, and I nearly crumbled under my Mila's years of heartless torment, her cruel grip threatening to shatter my family until I walked out and forced her regret. The sting of her rejection and vicious taunts drove me into solitude, fighting to shield my kids and marriage from her unending assaults. Before I reveal how I turned my life around, share where you're watching from in the comments, like if you've faced family cruelty, and subscribe for more tales of resilience. Let's go back to when her torment began, a silent battle in the shadow of her dominance that sparked my fight for freedom. The pain of her scorn and the burden on my spirit set the stage for a rebellion I never imagined, a journey that would redefine my strength and reshape my world against all odds. That silent battle I hinted at took root early in our marriage, a time when the Manhattan skyline shimmered with hope and our brownstone apartment pulsed with the vibrant energy of new beginnings. The sting of Margaret's rejection and vicious taunts had already begun to seep into my days, a subtle poison I barely noticed at first. David and I had just tied the knot, our love a bright thread weaving through the city's chaos, and for a brief, golden moment, his mother adored me. She'd envelop me in hugs at family dinners in her Brooklyn flat, the aroma of her famous apple pie mingling with the distant honk of taxis, her eyes crinkling with warmth as she called me dear. I felt like I belonged, a cherished part of their world, until we decided to move 17 minutes across town to our own place. A choice that transformed her affection into a cold, unyielding barrier that would define my struggle. It began over the first few years, a gradual shift that crept up on me like the fog rolling over the East River. We'd settled into our new neighborhood, a quiet street of brownstones with flower boxes and the ever-present hum of traffic, raising Sophie and Liam in a home filled with their giggles and crayon drawings. Margaret's love vanished the day we unpacked, her visits dwindling to stiff, obligatory stops where she'd stand in the doorway, lips pursed, surveying our living room as if it were a crime scene. One summer afternoon, she arrived unannounced, her heels clicking against the hardwood, and muttered, "You've made quite a mess here," her tone sharp as she ignored Sophie's eager hug. I brushed it off, telling myself she needed time to adjust, but the indifference gnawed at my self-esteem. At a family gathering in a bustling Central Park clearing, she turned away when I tried to join a conversation, chatting with David's aunt instead, leaving me stranded among the picnic blankets and laughter. The rejection stung, a quiet erosion of the confidence I'd brought into our marriage, and I felt the first cracks forming in my spirit as the city's noise seemed to mock my isolation. Her neglect of Sophie and Liam deepened my sense of failure over the next few months. They were toddlers then, their tiny hands reaching for her during her rare visits, but she'd brush them off with a distracted pat, her attention fixed on her phone or David. One rainy day, I invited her to Sophie's preschool play, a modest event in a cramped school auditorium near our brownstone, hoping to mend the rift. She declined with a curt, "I've got better things to do," her words a slap that echoed as I sat alone, clapping for my daughter's shaky rendition of a song. Liam's first steps went unnoticed too. She was too busy critiquing our apartment's decor during a fleeting visit, muttering, "This place lacks any real style," her voice dripping with disdain. The hurt settled deep, a failure I couldn't shake, as my kids' innocent trust in her faded, leaving me to fill the void with extra bedtime stories and gentle reassurances, my heart heavy with the burden of their disappointment. The city's relentless energy, once a source of inspiration, now felt like a weight pressing down on my resolve. Public slights from Margaret strained my bond with David as time passed. Early in our marriage, she ignored me at our wedding reception, held in a rented loft with the Manhattan skyline as a stunning backdrop, chatting with guests while I stood by the cake table, giftless and unnoticed, the clink of glasses a hollow sound in my ears. Over the years, her behavior escalated. Once, at a crowded Thanksgiving dinner in a friend's Upper East Side apartment, she loudly remarked, "Emily's no career woman," dismissing my university lecturing with a sneer that drew curious stares. David tried to intervene, his voice low and firm. "Mom, that's enough." But her glare silenced him, and I felt the distance grow between us, a chasm widening with each public humiliation. The burn of those moments lingered, my cheeks flushing as others whispered, and I began pulling away, my trust in our partnership wavering under her shadow. The city's relentless pace, subway crowds, honking cabs, amplified my isolation, each ride a reminder of her scorn, and I started imagining a life where her torment didn't define our love, a resolve taking shape in the quiet of those restless nights. Her early hostility took shape in subtle, cutting ways that left lasting scars. One spring evening, a few months after our move, she visited with a forced smile, presenting me with a single opened toiletry bag as a gift, its contents half-used and crumpled. "It's all I had lying around," she said with a hollow laugh, while showering David with a new leather wallet. I forced a thank you through gritted teeth, but the insult lingered, a jab at my worth that replayed in my mind. At a family picnic in Central Park, she turned to David's sister, ignoring my attempts to join their laughter, her exclusion a deliberate snub that left me clutching a paper plate in silence. The hurt piled up, my confidence fraying as I watched her favor others, and I began retreating to the kitchen during visits, my hands busy with dishes to avoid her piercing gaze. The brownstone, once a haven filled with our family's warmth, felt like a stage for her disapproval, and I sensed the silent war brewing within me, a rebellion stirring beneath the surface. David's attempts to mediate only deepened the rift over time. He'd pull me aside after her visits, his voice gentle but uncertain. "She'll come around eventually," his optimism a thin shield against her barbs. One autumn day, as leaves fell outside our window, she called me unfit in a group text to the family, her words a public lash that stung more than I admitted. David defended me, saying, "That's unfair, Mom." But his reluctance to confront her fully left me feeling unsupported, a crack in our unity that widened with each encounter. I'd lie awake, the city's distant sirens a lonely lullaby, replaying her words, my self-worth eroding with each memory of her disdain. The strain on our marriage grew, my love for him tested by her interference, and I began imagining a future where her torment didn't dictate our happiness, a resolve taking shape in the solitude of those nights, fueled by the flickering hope of reclaiming my voice. The kids' confusion added to my burden as the months wore on. Sophie and Liam, eager for their grandma's affection, would ask, "Why doesn't Nana like us?" after her brief, dismissive visits, their innocent eyes searching mine for answers. One Saturday morning, Liam ran to her with a finger-painted masterpiece, only for her to set it aside with a muttered, "Not now, I'm busy," her focus on her phone. I comforted them with extra bedtime tales, my voice steady but my heart aching, feeling like I'd failed to give them the grandmotherly love they deserved. The guilt gnawed at me, a weight that grew with each ignored milestone. Sophie's first school play in a crowded auditorium, Liam's tentative soccer kicks on a muddy field, where Margaret's absence loomed like a specter. The city's energy, once a source of inspiration, now felt suffocating, her neglect a shadow over our home. And I started plotting how to protect my kids from her cold indifference, a quiet determination budding within. My work as a lecturer began to falter under this mounting strain a short time later. At the university, I'd stand before my literature class in a lecture hall bathed in soft light, my voice trembling as Margaret's insults echoed in my head, disrupting my flow on Shakespearean themes. One evening, after a session in a bustling campus building, a colleague remarked, "You seem off lately," and I nodded, masking the turmoil with a forced smile. Her public jabs about my lack of career haunted me, despite my progress toward a PhD, and I'd spend late nights revising papers. The Manhattan skyline, a blurry backdrop outside my window. The pressure mounted, my focus slipping as I struggled to maintain my authority in front of students, and I felt her influence creeping into my professional life, a theft of the pride I'd earned through years of study. The exhaustion was a quiet companion, but it sparked a flicker of determination to rise above her scorn, a seed of rebellion taking root in the depths of my resolve. The toll on my marriage grew as the seasons changed. David's efforts to bridge the gap with Margaret often left me feeling sidelined, his conciliatory tone a contrast to my growing frustration. One crisp fall day, after she'd criticized my parenting in a family call, he murmured, "Maybe give her time." But his words felt like a betrayal, a crack in the foundation we'd built. I'd sit on our balcony, the city lights twinkling below, wrestling with the tension between us, my love for him tested by her shadow. The strain was a constant undercurrent, my patience thinning as I navigated her interference, and I began envisioning a life where her torment didn't dictate our harmony, a resolve strengthening with each sleepless night spent plotting my escape from her grip. By the time the first winter snow dusted New York, the heartless beginnings had left me fragile and weary. My self-esteem eroded under Margaret's relentless torment. My kids' trust in family strained by her absence, my marriage tested by her influence, and my work faltered under the weight of her scorn. Her years of heartless control had constructed an unyielding wall around me, but within its cracks grew a resolve I hadn't fully grasped. I'd sit by the window, the city's distant glow a faint comfort, plotting to end this suffocating rain. The pain, the isolation, the burden, they were forging a strength, a rebellion against the woman who'd nearly destroyed me and the man who'd let her. That strength would soon erupt, a fight I'd carry forward to walk out and force her regret. That silent battle I spoke of had grown into a deeper wound over the years, a scar etched by Margaret's heartless torment that shadowed my life in the heart of New York. The brownstone apartment, with its tall windows framing the distant Manhattan skyline and the soft patter of rain against the panes, had become my sanctuary where I fought to shield Sophie and Liam from her cruelty, but the peace I'd held onto was slipping through my fingers. David's warm connection with my family, those lively BBQs in our Queens backyard, the clink of glasses during holiday toasts, offered a glimmer of hope, a stark contrast to Margaret's icy disdain that loomed over us. The pain of her rejection and vicious taunts had already begun to shape my resolve, and now, as her hostility sharpened with neglect during my kids' toughest times and a refusal to value my efforts, I felt a quiet determination rising to reclaim my peace from the chaos she'd unleashed across the city. It started over the years, a gradual intensification that wove itself into the fabric of our New York existence. One winter evening, when Sophie was a fragile newborn, she was rushed to the ICU, her tiny chest heaving against a ventilator after a brutal respiratory infection swept through the urban air. I stood by her bedside, my hands shaking as the machines beeped a relentless tune, and David, desperate for support, urged Margaret to ask me for the consultant's update. Her response came through the phone, a cold, "Who?" that pierced my exhaustion like a shard of glass, leaving me stunned in the sterile hospital corridor. The neglect cut deep, a wound that festered as I nursed Sophie back to health over the next few months. Her absence during those critical days a silent judgment that weighed on my soul. The city's winter winds howled outside, rattling the hospital windows, and I felt the burden of her indifference grow, a quiet resolve forming to protect my family from her reach. Her online attacks tarnished my academic reputation as the seasons turned, a new battlefield in her campaign against me. As a university lecturer, I'd poured my heart into my literature classes, my voice resonating in a grand lecture hall near Columbia, where students leaned forward, captivated by my insights on poetry. But Margaret's jealousy struck a vicious blow one spring afternoon when I opened Facebook to find her post labeling me an unfit mother with no real career, a public smear that ricocheted through our extended family and academic circles. The humiliation seared my skin, my colleagues' pitying glances at faculty meetings a constant reminder of her reach, and I spent late nights defending my PhD research, the Manhattan skyline a blurred backdrop as I revised my dissertation on identity in literature. The damage to my professional standing gnawed at me. Whispers of doubt among peers who'd seen the post eroding my credibility, and I felt her influence infiltrating the one place I'd found pride, sparking a fierce determination to rise above her slander amid the city's unyielding rhythm. David's divided loyalty created tension between us over the next few years, a strain that tested the roots of our 8-year marriage. His brilliant bond with my family, nights at a cozy Queen's pub with my dad, sharing war stories over foamy beers, and BBQs where my mom twirled with Sophie, stood in stark contrast to Margaret's coldness, her unhinged jealousy widening the gap. One rainy evening, after she'd skipped Liam's birthday party held in our living room with balloons and a homemade cake, David tried to mediate, saying, "Mom's just hurt by our move," his voice tentative as we sat on our couch, the rain tapping a mournful rhythm. His reluctance to fully confront her left me feeling unsupported, a crack in our unity that deepened with each half-hearted excuse. I'd watch him laugh with my dad, a warmth she envied, and feel the strain. My love for him stretched thin by her shadow. The tension grew, my patience wearing thin as I navigated her interference, and I began envisioning a life where her torment didn't dictate our happiness, a resolve strengthening with each quiet moment of reflection in the city's restless nights. Her jealousy drained my emotional energy as the months unfolded, a theft of my identity that left me exhausted. Margaret's fixation on copying my Western style, cowboy boots and fringed jackets I'd worn for years as a tribute to my heritage, turned into a bizarre imitation. Her sudden shift from her usual plain attire to my signature look a blatant taunt. One crisp fall day, I saw her at a family gathering in Bryant Park, her boots clacking as she strutted past, smirking as if to steal my essence, her fringed jacket a mocking reflection of mine. The sight drained me, my energy sapped by her petty rivalry, and I retreated to a bench, the city's autumn leaves swirling around me as I fought to reclaim my sense of self. David noticed my withdrawal, asking, "What's bothering you?" But his failure to grasp her intent left me isolated, my emotional reserves dwindling under the weight of her mimicry. The jealousy was a constant undercurrent, an erosion of my individuality, and I started plotting how to break free from her suffocating presence, a quiet fire igniting within as I navigated the crowded streets. The kids' growing awareness of her neglect added to my strain over time, a burden that weighed heavily on my heart. Sophie and Liam, now thriving in school, would ask, "Why doesn't Nana want to know us?" After her rare, dismissive visits, their voices laced with confusion as they built forts in our living room. One Saturday morning, Sophie presented her a handmade card for Mother's Day, only for Margaret to set it aside with a muttered, "That's sweet," her attention drifting to her phone as she scrolled through social media. I comforted them with extra play sessions, my heart aching as I tried to fill the void, feeling like I'd failed to give them the grandmotherly love they yearned for. The guilt gnawed at me, a weight that grew with each missed milestone. Sophie's piano recital in a small Greenwich Village hall, Liam's first science fair project in a crowded school gym, where Margaret's absence was a glaring void that dimmed their joy. The city's vibrant energy, once a source of inspiration, now felt like a mirror to my isolation, and I began planning how to protect my kids from her cold indifference, a resolve budding in the quiet of those tender exchanges. My work as a lecturer faced new hurdles under this mounting pressure a short time later, a struggle on an unexpected front. At the university, I'd stand before my students, my lectures on modernist poetry faltering as Margaret's insults reverberated, disrupting my focus in the packed lecture hall where the hum of anticipation once lifted me. One evening, after a class in a bustling campus building near Morningside Heights, a senior professor pulled me aside, saying, "You've seemed distracted lately." And I nodded, masking the turmoil with a strained smile as I adjusted my notes. Her public jabs about my lack of career haunted me, despite my nearing PhD completion, and I'd spend late nights refining my dissertation, the Manhattan skyline a distant blur through my office window as I wrestled with theories of resilience in literature. The pressure mounted, my authority in the classroom wavering as students murmured about the family drama, and I felt her influence creeping into my professional life, a theft of the pride I'd earned through years of dedication. The exhaustion was a quiet companion, but it sparked a determination to rise above her scorn, a seed of rebellion taking root in my weary spirit. The strain on my marriage intensified as the seasons shifted, a test of our bond amid her looming presence. David's efforts to bridge the gap with Margaret often left me feeling sidelined, his conciliatory tone a stark contrast to my growing frustration. One crisp fall day, after she'd criticized my handling of Liam's homework in a family call, he murmured, "Maybe she's just upset about us moving." But his words felt like a betrayal, a crack in the foundation we'd built over 8 years. I'd sit on our balcony, the city lights twinkling below like distant stars, wrestling with the tension between us, my love for him stretched thin by her interference as the night air carried the scent of autumn leaves. The strain was a constant undercurrent, my patience wearing thin as I navigated her barbs, and I began envisioning a life where her torment didn't dictate our happiness, a resolve strengthening with each sleepless night spent plotting my escape from her grip. The city's relentless rhythm, street vendors calling out, subway rumbles beneath our feet, amplified my isolation, each sound a reminder of the battle I was fighting within. My family's support became a beacon amid this growing darkness over the next few months, a light piercing the urban sprawl. My parents welcomed David with open arms, their Queens home a haven where he bonded with my dad over shared beers and old war stories, the clink of glasses a warm sound against the city's hum. One sunny afternoon, we hosted a BBQ in our backyard, the grill sizzling with burgers as my mom danced with Sophie and Liam, a scene Margaret had never joined. Her absence a silent rebuke that fueled my spirit. The contrast strengthened my resolve, their love a stark counterpoint to her neglect, and I began leaning on them for strength, their acceptance a quiet refuge from her rejection. The city's diverse pulse, street musicians strumming in subway stations, park picnics under the Brooklyn Bridge, highlighted this sanctuary, and I started imagining a future where her influence couldn't touch us. A plan taking shape in the warmth of those gatherings as I sketched out ways to reclaim my space and protect my family. The emotional toll mounted as the seasons turned, a weight that tested my endurance. I'd catch my reflection in the hallway mirror, dark circles under my eyes and a tightness in my shoulders. The strain of Margaret's torment etched into my face like the city's wear. One night, after a long day of balancing work and kids, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of her dominance pressing down like the Manhattan skyline at dusk. My appetite waned, meals left untouched as anxiety knotted my stomach, and I leaned on chamomile tea to calm my nerves, the steam of fleeting comfort against the city's noise. The isolation from friends and the shifting dynamics with David left me adrift, a quiet ache that fueled my determination. I began sketching plans in my mind, ways to push back, the betrayal and burden forging a strength I hadn't yet fully embraced, a rebellion simmering beneath the surface of my daily struggles. By the time spring rain washed over New York, the deepening wound had left me battered but unbowed. My academic reputation tarnished by her online venom, my marriage strained by David's divided loyalty, my emotional energy drained by her jealousy, and my kids' trust in family shaken by her absence. Her heartless torment had built a wall around me. Yet within those cracks grew a resolve I hadn't fully grasped. I'd stand on our balcony, the city lights a distant promise against the rain-streaked glass, plotting to end this suffocating rain. The pain, the isolation, the burden, they were forging a strength, a rebellion against the woman who'd nearly destroyed me and the man who'd let her. That strength would soon erupt, a fight I'd carry forward to walk out and force her regret. That quiet resolve I'd begun to nurture against Margaret's torment had swelled into a breaking storm, a tempest that erupted in the heart of our New York life, where the Manhattan skyline stood as a silent witness to my struggle. The brownstone apartment, with its warm glow softening the edges of the city's chaos and the distant hum of traffic seeping through the walls, had been my sanctuary, but the pain of her rejection and the weight of her cruelty had pushed me to a precipice I couldn't ignore. The strength I'd forged from her earlier assaults had grown, and now, during one tense visit, her accusations ignited a fire within me, leading me to walk out and shatter the fragile peace we'd maintained, a moment that would unleash a fallout testing my every limit in the urban sprawl. It began one tense visit, a few days before our planned family holiday, when the air in our home crackled with unspoken tension that seemed to mirror the restless energy of New York. We'd committed to my cousin's 30th birthday party, a family-friendly celebration booked in a rented hall near Times Square for 6 months, where Sophie and Liam could join the festivities with cousins and games. Margaret's daughter, David's sister, had thrown together a last-minute 23rd birthday bash, a raucous event we couldn't fit into our schedule with the kids' bedtime routines. To keep the peace, we decided to stop by Margaret's Brooklyn flat to drop off cards and gifts, the narrow stairs creaking under our steps as we carried the carefully wrapped packages. She greeted us with a tight-lipped smile, her eyes narrowing as she took the gifts with a perfunctory nod. But the moment I mentioned our party choice, her demeanor shifted like a storm rolling in. "You're picking your cousin over my daughter?" she snapped, her voice cutting through the hum of the city outside. "You don't see her as real family, do you? Always running back to your own blood instead of us." The accusation hit me like a thunderclap, years of her coldness flashing through my mind, and I felt my patience shatter like glass. I stood up from the worn sofa, my hands trembling with a mix of anger and resolve, and faced her squarely. "I've had enough of your endless judgment," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. "We chose what's best for our kids, not to spite anyone, but you've never supported us, only torn us down." She scoffed, crossing her arms with a sneer. "You're just jealous of my daughter's freedom, always playing the martyr." The words stoked the fire I'd suppressed for too long, and I turned to David, who sat silently, his expression a mask of conflict. "This isn't right," I continued, my tone firm and unyielding. "I've bent over backwards to make this work, but your mother's hostility has crossed every line." Margaret's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "You think you're above us? You're nothing without David holding you up." The dismissal was the final spark, and I declared, "I'm leaving this behind," grabbing my coat and stepping out, the door's slam reverberating through the flat as I emerged into the chilly New York night, my breath visible in the air. A few days later, the fallout began to unfold, a wave of blame that deepened my isolation in the city's unforgiving embrace. David's siblings reached out, their voices a blend of curiosity and condemnation over the phone as the Manhattan traffic roared in the background. "What did you do to Mom now?" his brother asked, the question laced with accusation. "She's devastated, saying you attacked her out of nowhere," his sister added, her tone heavy with reproach. I explained the years of neglect, the latest insult over the party choice, but their responses were tepid. "She's still our mom, you could have been kinder," leaving me feeling like an outsider in David's family. The isolation grew, my heart sinking as I walked past the brownstone stoop, the city's pulse a lonely drumbeat, and I felt the weight of their judgment pressing down, a loneliness that fueled my determination to hold my ground against their narrative. David's hesitations strained our trust over the next week, a crack in our foundation that widened with each quiet moment. He returned home that night, his face etched with worry, and murmured, "Maybe we should reach out to smooth things over," his voice tentative as we stood in our kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. I stared at him, the sting of his suggestion cutting deep into my resolve. "After all she's put me through, I've stayed silent for years," I replied, my voice trembling with a mix of hurt and defiance. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just want to avoid more conflict." But his reluctance to fully stand by me left a chill between us, a distance that grew as we ate dinner in awkward silence. I'd lie awake, the city lights filtering through the curtains, wrestling with the tension, my love for him tested by his divided loyalty. The strain was a constant ache, and I began imagining a future where her influence didn't fracture our bond, a resolve hardening with each restless night spent plotting my next step. Public gossip fueled my humiliation as the days stretched on, a new layer of torment in the urban landscape. At a university fundraiser in a crowded midtown ballroom, a colleague leaned in, whispering, "Heard you had a meltdown with your mill," her eyes wide with intrigue, the rumor spreading like wildfire among the faculty. In a local cafe near our brownstone, a neighbor offered a sympathetic nod, saying, "Margaret's been airing her grievances about you," her tone tinged with judgment that lingered in the air. The humiliation burned, my cheeks flushing as I navigated the subway, the stares of strangers a mirror to my shame, and I felt the city's vibrant energy turn against me with every step. My students noticed my distraction during a lecture, one asking, "Are you all right, Professor?" as I stumbled over a point on Victorian novels, and I masked the turmoil with a forced smile, the pressure mounting with each passing hour. The public backlash was a heavy cloak, but it sparked a quiet defiance, a strength taking root as I planned to rise above her damaging story. The kids' reaction added to my burden over the next few days, a weight that tugged at my heart. Sophie and Liam, sensing the shift, asked, "Did we upset Nana?" As they colored at the kitchen table, their innocent faces clouded with worry. I reassured them, "This isn't about you, I promise." But the uncertainty in their eyes lingered, a burden on my soul as I tucked them into bed with extra stories. The next morning, Liam clung to my leg, whispering, "I don't want Nana to be mad." And I hugged him tight, feeling the strain of their confusion. The guilt gnawed at me, a weight that grew as I shielded them from the fallout, their trust in family wavering under Margaret's absence from their lives. The city's noise, honking cabs, street vendors shouting, amplified my isolation, and I began plotting how to protect them from her shadow, a resolve strengthening with each tender moment spent soothing their fears. David's family dynamics shifted uneasily as the week progressed, a rift that mirrored my own struggle in the urban sprawl. His siblings' calls turned into a barrage of texts. "Mom's hurt, can you make amends?" But their lack of empathy left me feeling abandoned by his side. One evening, his brother dropped by, saying, "You could have handled it with more grace," his tone a subtle blame that stung like a slap. I explained the years of torment, the breaking point with her accusations, but his shrug, "She's still our mom," widened the gap, and I felt the isolation deepen in the quiet of our home. David tried to mediate, "Let's give it some space," but his hesitation fueled my resolve to stand firm. The city's skyline a silent witness to my growing strength. The tension was a constant hum, and I began envisioning a life where her influence didn't divide us, a plan taking shape in the stillness of those strained exchanges as I mapped out my defense. My professional life faced new scrutiny amid this chaos a short time later, a challenge that tested my resilience. At the university, a department head summoned me to her office, noting, "There's been chatter about your personal life impacting your focus," a veiled reference to Margaret's gossip that had reached the faculty lounge. I defended my PhD progress, detailing my research on Victorian resilience, but the pressure mounted, my lectures faltering as I struggled to maintain authority in the classroom. One night, I stayed late in the campus library, the quiet a refuge from the storm, reworking my dissertation with a determination that surprised me. The city lights a distant glow through the windows. The challenge was a crucible, but it sparked a resolve to prove my worth, a quiet fire igniting as I navigated the fallout and prepared to reclaim my voice. The emotional toll grew as the days stretched into a week, a weight that pressed on my spirit. I'd catch my reflection in the hallway mirror, dark circles under my eyes and a tightness in my shoulders. The strain of Margaret's actions etched into my face like the city's wear. One night, after soothing Liam's fears with a bedtime story, I sat by the window, the city's pulse a distant hum, feeling the burden of her cruelty. My appetite faded, meals left cold, as anxiety knotted my stomach, and I leaned on chamomile tea, the steam a fleeting comfort against the urban din. The isolation from friends and the shifting dynamics with David left me adrift, a quiet ache that fueled my determination. I began sketching plans in my mind, ways to push back, the betrayal and burden forging a strength I hadn't yet fully embraced, a rebellion simmering beneath the surface of my daily struggles. The community's reaction intensified over the next few days, a wave of judgment that swept through my social circle. At a neighborhood block party in our Brooklyn street, a friend pulled me aside, whispering, "Margaret's been telling everyone you're unreasonable," her eyes filled with pity. The gossip spread, reaching my university circles, where a student's parent remarked, "Heard about your family drama," during a parent-teacher event. The humiliation burned, my cheeks flushing as I walked the crowded sidewalks, the stares of strangers a constant reminder of my shame. And I felt the city's vibrant energy turn into a stage for my vulnerability. The public backlash was a heavy cloak, but it sparked a quiet defiance, a strength taking root as I planned to rise above her damaging narrative and reclaim my place. By the time spring blossoms dotted New York, the breaking storm had ignited my fight. The sibling blame, David's hesitation, the public gossip, they were a triad of pain, but also a catalyst for change. I'd sit with Sophie and Liam, their laughter over a board game a flicker of hope, planning to reclaim my strength. Margaret thought she could break me with her accusations, but I was done bending to her will. This was the moment I'd walk out and force her regret, a battle I'd carry forward with every ounce of my resolve. That fight I'd sparked against Margaret's torment had transformed into a silent stand, a steadfast resolve that took root after I walked out, reshaping my world against the vibrant pulse of New York. The brownstone apartment, with its warm hearth casting a golden glow across the room, and the Manhattan skyline a constant guardian through the tall windows, had become my sanctuary, where I drew strength from David and shielded Sophie and Liam from the lingering echoes of her cruelty. The resilience I'd built from her earlier assaults had matured into a quiet power, and now, as her allies' pressure and her waning influence tested my limits, I poured my energy into my career, excelling as a lecturer and nearing my PhD. a triumph that began to erode her control and sow the seeds of regret I'd force her to confront across the city's sprawling landscape. It began after walking out, a few days into the heavy silence that followed my departure from her Brooklyn flat, when her demands resurfaced like a stubborn whisper in the urban night. Margaret's allies, a tight-knit group of friends she'd rallied to her side, began calling David with feigned sympathy, their voices laced with manipulation. "She's devastated. Emily should reconsider her stance." I overheard him on the phone one evening, the city's distant sirens blending with his murmured responses, and felt a surge of frustration that tightened my chest. I confronted him in our kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator a quiet witness, and said, "I won't yield to her after all she's put us through," my voice steady with a resolve that surprised me. Her pressure infiltrated my lectures, with a colleague pulling me aside during a break in the faculty lounge, whispering, "There's chatter about your family affecting your work," a disruption that rattled my focus. The intrusion was a persistent thorn, but it fueled my determination to stand firm, my classroom a battlefield where I'd prove my strength. The first step toward turning her allies' narrative into a reflection of her own failures. A couple of weeks later, job scrutiny from her influence loomed like a dark shadow over my career, a challenge that threatened my professional stability. At the university, a department head summoned me to her office, her tone measured yet firm as she said, "We've received feedback about your concentration, possibly tied to personal issues." The veiled reference to Margaret's gossip stung, a reminder of her reach into the academic world I'd cultivated, and I felt the pressure mount as I defended my PhD progress on resilience in literature, my voice unwavering despite the knot in my stomach. I spent late nights in the campus library, the quiet a sanctuary from the storm, reworking my dissertation with a fierce determination. The Manhattan skyline a blurred inspiration through the rain-streaked windows as I delved into themes of identity and survival. The scrutiny was a crucible, my role as a lecturer hanging by a fragile thread, but it sparked a quiet fire within me to excel. My lectures on modernist poetry gaining acclaim as students lingered after class to discuss my insights, a subtle revenge against her efforts to undermine my reputation. Kid care demands tested my limits over the next few months, a relentless challenge that stretched my endurance to its breaking point. Sophie and Liam, adjusting to the new family dynamics, required more of my time and attention. Sophie's school projects demanded late-night guidance, her essays on historical revolutions stretching my patience as we sat at the dining table, while Liam's bedtime fears escalated, his whispers of dark corners pulling me from restless sleep with a frequency that wore me thin. One rainy afternoon, I hunched over Sophie's desk, my back aching as I helped her craft a presentation on the Industrial Revolution, the room lit by the soft glow of a lamp, only for Liam to interrupt with a tantrum over a lost book, his cries reverberating through the brownstone. The workload doubled, my days a marathon of school runs, homework supervision, and soothing hugs, leaving me with little time to recharge as the city's rhythm, subway rumbles, street vendors' calls, pressed in from beyond our walls. David pitched in when his schedule permitted, but his late hours at the office limited his support, and I felt the crushing weight of their dependence, my energy sapped to a whisper. The strain was a heavy cloak, but it forged a resolve to shield them, a strength growing as I planned to rise above Margaret's lingering influence with every tender moment spent with my kids. David's support became a cornerstone of my stand a short time after, a lifeline that anchored me amid the urban chaos. He stood by me after the walkout, his voice steady as he said, "I'm with you. She's crossed every line." During a quiet moment on our balcony, the city lights a distant shimmer against the night sky. His shift from mediation to alliance was a turning point, and we leaned on my family, my parents' Queens home, a haven where he bonded with my dad over beers. their laughter a warm contrast to Margaret's coldness as they swapped stories by the fireplace. One sunny day, we visited for a picnic in Flushing Meadows Park, the green expanse a refuge as my mom played tag with Sophie and Liam, a scene Margaret had never graced, her absence a silent rebuke that fueled my spirit. The city's diverse pulse, street musicians strumming in subway stations, vendors in Chinatown offering steaming dumplings, highlighted this support, and I began imagining a future where her influence couldn't touch us, a plan taking shape as I drew strength from their love, sketching out strategies to reclaim my space and protect my family from her reach. Margaret's reaction began to falter as my success grew over the next few weeks, a hint of her regret flickering in the urban shadows. Word of my PhD progress reached her circle, a colleague mentioning at a faculty mixer, "Emily's dissertation on resilience is setting a new standard." And I noticed her allies' calls to David taper off, their confidence shaken by my rising star. At a university symposium in a midtown hall, my lecture on resilience drew a standing ovation, the applause a public rebuttal to her claims, and I felt a surge of pride that warmed my chest as the crowd's energy filled the room. Margaret's friends, once vocal in their defense of her, grew silent, their whispers fading as my reputation soared, and I sensed her isolation deepening. A silent victory that fueled my resolve. The city's energy, bright lights reflecting off skyscrapers, bustling streets alive with possibility, mirrored my rising strength, and I began plotting how to cement her regret, a rebellion taking shape in my achievements as I prepared to outshine her narrative with every step forward. My students' support added to my resolve a month later, an unexpected ally in my silent war against her legacy. During a class on feminist literature in a packed lecture hall, a student lingered after, saying, "Your strength in the face of adversity inspires us." Their words a balm to the wounds Margaret had inflicted over the years. I shared a measured piece of my journey, framing it as a lesson in perseverance, and their essays reflected a newfound admiration, their feedback filled with lines like, "Professor Emily's courage reshapes our perspective." The validation was a shield, my lectures gaining depth as I wove my experience into discussions on empowerment, and I felt the university community rally behind me, their support a quiet army in my corner. The city's academic hub, libraries humming with late-night study, lecture halls buzzing with intellectual fervor, became a stage for my triumph, and I began envisioning a future where her influence was a distant memory, a plan solidifying as I prepared to eclipse her with my success and force her to acknowledge my worth. The emotional toll lingered as the months progressed, a weight I learned to transform into a source of power. I'd catch my reflection in the hallway mirror, dark circles under my eyes and a tightness in my shoulders. The strain, a testament to my fight against Margaret's legacy, etched into my face like the city's own weariness. One night, after soothing Sophie's nightmares with a gentle lullaby about stars, I sat by the window, the city's pulse a distant hum, feeling the burden of her actions like a heavy fog rolling in from the Hudson. My appetite wavered, meals left cold as anxiety knotted my stomach, and I leaned on chamomile tea, the steam a fleeting comfort against the urban din that seeped through the walls. The isolation from her family, once a wound, now fueled my resolve, and I began sketching plans in my mind, the betrayal forging a strength I embraced, a rebellion simmering as I prepared to force her regret with every ounce of my will. My colleagues' recognition grew as the weeks unfolded, a ripple of support that bolstered my silent stand. At a faculty dinner in a chic downtown restaurant near Wall Street, a senior professor raised a glass, toasting to Emily's unwavering dedication to her craft, a nod to my PhD progress that echoed through the room with clinking glasses. The praise was a shield against Margaret's past slights, my research on resilience gaining traction in academic journals, and I felt the university's respect solidify my position as a leader in my field. The city's intellectual pulse, debates in coffee shops along Broadway, seminars in grand halls, reflected my rising status, and I began plotting how to use this success to undermine her influence. A quiet victory taking shape as I prepared to turn the tables and make her feel the weight of her actions. The community's subtle shift added to my momentum a short time after, a sign of her diminishing power. At a neighborhood block party in our Brooklyn street, a friend who'd once sided with Margaret pulled me aside, murmuring, "I didn't realize how tough it's been for you," her tone a quiet apology. The gossip that had once fueled my humiliation began to turn, with whispers of, "Margaret's gone too far," circulating among the parents at Sophie's school. The city's social fabric, park gatherings, local shops, started to reflect my resilience, and I felt a shift in the air, a growing respect that undermined her narrative. This support was a quiet ally, and I began envisioning a future where her regret was palpable, a plan solidifying as I prepared to cement my victory with every public step. By the time summer heat blanketed New York, the silent stand had begun to redefine my path. The Allies' pressure, job scrutiny, kid care demands, they were a triad of pain, but also a spark of transformation. I'd sit with David and the kids, their laughter over a puzzle, a flicker of hope in our living room, planning to reclaim my power with my achievements. Margaret thought she could break me with her allies' whispers, but I was done yielding to her will. This was the moment I'd force her regret, a fight I'd carry forward with every ounce of my strength, building a life where her shadow couldn't dim my light. That strength I'd honed against Margaret's torment had blossomed into a reign of regret, a triumph that unfolded over the next year, reshaping my life against the vibrant pulse of New York. The brownstone apartment, with its cozy hearth casting a warm glow across the living space, and the Manhattan skyline a steadfast companion through the windows, had transformed into a sanctuary where I thrived with David, Sophie, and Liam, the echoes of her cruelty fading into a distant whisper. The resilience I'd built from her past assaults had matured into a powerful force, and now, as I completed my PhD and forged a new family harmony, her isolation deepened, her reputation unraveling as her own kin drifted away. A silent acknowledgement of the regret I'd compelled her to face across the city's sprawling terrain. It began over the next year, a season of renewal that emerged with a quiet intensity amid New York's bustling streets. I'd poured my heart into my PhD, the final chapters of my dissertation on resilience taking shape during late-night sessions in the university library. The soft hum of fluorescent lights a contrast to the city's neon pulse outside. The completion ceremony, held in a grand auditorium near Columbia, was a milestone, the room erupting in applause as I accepted my doctorate. The weight of the certificate, a tangible symbol of my victory over Margaret's doubts. David stood beside me, his eyes shining with pride, while Sophie and Liam cheered from the front row, their handmade signs fluttering with excitement. The celebration spilled into our brownstone, where my parents arrived with trays of homemade lasagna, their queen's warmth filling the air with laughter and heartfelt toasts, a stark contrast to Margaret's absence that felt like a victory in itself. The city's energy, street fairs in Greenwich Village, the distant melody of buskers in Times Square, reflected my rising spirit, and I felt the first stirrings of a life unshackled from her oppressive shadow, a foundation I was determined to solidify. A few months later, false custody claims by Margaret's allies emerged, a desperate ploy to reclaim their influence over my world. Her friends, clinging to her fading authority, hired a lawyer to file a petition, alleging I was unfit to care for Sophie and Liam due to unstable family dynamics stemming from the rift. The accusation arrived in a certified letter, its official seal a cold jolt as I opened it at the kitchen table, the morning light casting long shadows across the room. David and I met our attorney in a sleek midtown office, the city skyline a backdrop to our defense, where I presented a dossier of my stability, PhD completion, glowing work reviews, and family support letters, while the lawyer dismantled their claims with legal precision. The stress was a relentless burden. Sleepless nights spent reviewing documents as the city's noise, taxi horns, pedestrian chatter pressed in, but it fueled my resolve to protect my kids, a strength growing as I turned their attack into a testament of my resilience, planting the seeds of Margaret's regret. David's unwavering support deepened our bond over the next few weeks, a pillar that upheld my new reign. He took time off work to assist with the custody battle, his presence a steady hand as we navigated legal meetings, the brownstone a hub of strategy sessions with my parents' guidance. One evening, we sat on the balcony, the city lights a shimmering sea below, and he said, "I'm in awe of your strength through this," his voice soft but resolute. The connection with my family grew richer. My dad took Liam to a Mets game at Citi Field. My mom taught Sophie to knit scarves, their love a fortress against Margaret's past. The city's diverse pulse, salsa dancing in the Bronx, art markets in Soho, mirrored this unity, and I began envisioning a future where her influence was a faded echo, a plan taking shape as I leaned on their support to build a life defined by my own terms, free from her grasp. Margaret's isolation became palpable a short time after, a consequence of her actions rippling through her social world. Word reached us through a distant cousin that her family had pulled back. David's siblings visited less, their calls to her sparse, leaving her Brooklyn flat a hollow shell of its former liveliness. At a community fundraiser in a Queens park, a neighbor confided, "Margaret's lost her old friends, keeps lamenting your success," her tone a mix of pity and admiration. Her reputation, once propped up by social standing, began to erode. Whispers of that overbearing mother-in-law circulating among New York's elite circles, her invitations to galas dwindling. The city's social scene, charity balls in Midtown, neighborhood coffee clatches, reflected her decline, and I felt a quiet satisfaction, a revenge unfolding as her isolation mirrored the pain she'd inflicted, a resolve strengthening as I watched her world contract under the weight of her choices. My career soared as the months unfolded, a public triumph that solidified my stand. The university offered me a tenured position, my PhD in resilience opening doors to a speaking tour across the East Coast, the itinerary finalized in a sunlit office overlooking the Hudson. The kickoff event, held in a chic Soho gallery, drew academics, students, and local figures, their praise a stark contrast to Margaret's past scorn as I shared my journey of overcoming adversity. The media picked up the story, New York professors rise from family strife, headlining a city paper, and my book proposal on resilience found a publisher, the contract a milestone of my success. The city's intellectual hub, book signings along Fifth Avenue, panel discussions in Brooklyn, became my stage, and I began plotting how to use this acclaim to force her regret, a rebellion taking shape as I transformed my pain into a legacy that outshone her narrative. The kids' growth added joy to my reign over the next few months, a healing balm for the scars of the past. Sophie discovered a passion for photography, her first exhibit held in a small gallery near our brownstone, her black and white shots of the city earning praise from local artists who marveled at her eye. Liam embraced astronomy, his telescope set up on the balcony to track constellations, his excitement over spotting Orion a delight during our stargazing nights as we huddled under blankets. I attended every milestone, my presence a shield against Margaret's absence, and their pride in my achievements, Sophie's "You're my hero" note tucked into my bag, Liam's star chart dedication framed on the wall were rewards for my fight. The city's family-friendly pulse, museums in Manhattan, outdoor concerts in Prospect Park reflected their blossoming, and I began envisioning a future where her influence was a forgotten whisper, a plan solidifying as I built a home filled with love, stability, and shared dreams. The community's support expanded as the year progressed, a network that fortified my victory against her legacy. At a local literacy event in a Brooklyn library, a teacher approached me saying, "Your story motivates our students to persevere." Their donation a tribute to my resilience that funded new books for underprivileged kids. The neighborhood organized a talent show on our street, where Sophie and Liam performed a duet, their voices harmonizing to a crowd's cheers, their success a stark contrast to Margaret's isolation. The city's social fabric, community gardens in the East Village, street festivals in Harlem, reflected this alliance. And I felt a shift, a public recognition of my strength that undermined her past dominance. This support was a quiet ally, and I began plotting how to use it to ensure her regret was complete, a resolve hardening as I prepared to close the chapter on her torment with a flourish of my own making. The emotional growth I experienced over this time was a quiet revolution, a transformation of my inner landscape. I'd stand on the balcony, the city lights a beacon of hope against the night sky, reflecting on the journey from pain to power, my confidence soaring with each deep breath. My appetite returned, meals shared with family around the dining table as anxiety faded into a distant memory, and I embraced yoga in a nearby studio, the stretches a calm contrast to past turmoil that eased my mind and body. The isolation from Margaret's world, once a wound, now fueled my independence, and I began sketching a future where her regret was a permanent mark, a strength I embraced as I prepared to define my legacy with unwavering resolve, my spirit lifted by the city's endless possibilities. My extended family's embrace added depth to my reign a short time after, a new layer of connection that enriched my victory. My aunt from Long Island visited, bringing tales of her own triumphs over toxic relatives, her wisdom a guide as we sipped tea on the couch, the brownstone filled with her laughter. My cousins joined us for a Thanksgiving feast, their voices blending with ours as we shared gratitude over a table laden with turkey and pies, a tradition Margaret had never honored with her presence. The city's familial pulse, holiday lights in Diker Heights, family brunches in Little Italy reflected this bond, and I began envisioning a future where her influence was erased, a plan solidifying as I wove these connections into a tapestry of chosen family, a quiet victory over her rejection that strengthened my resolve. The legal resolutions solidified my stand a few months later, a final blow to her influence. The custody case was dismissed, the judge's ruling citing my stability and Margaret's allies' lack of evidence, a decision that echoed through New York's legal circles. The victory was a public rebuke, reported in a local paper as "Mother's Triumph Over False Claims," and I felt a surge of pride as I read the headline over breakfast. The city's justice system, courtrooms in Lower Manhattan, law offices in Midtown, became a stage for my vindication, and I began plotting how to use this outcome to ensure her regret was undeniable, a rebellion taking shape as I prepared to close the door on her past with a firm hand. If I could share one piece of advice, it's this: don't tolerate toxic in-laws. Establish firm boundaries. Margaret's cruelty nearly broke me, but setting limits saved my spirit. Stand tall against their pressure, for your life is yours to mold. The lesson I carry is clear. Leaving toxic ties brings peace and power. I sacrificed her approval, gaining a life of my own design. This victory, forcing her regret through my success and isolation, wasn't vengeance, it was liberation. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family harmony and self-respect? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found value in my story, please like and subscribe to hear more about navigating life's challenges and building your own strength.